The New York Giants made a big hire by bringing back Aaron Wellman to be their new executive director of player performance. We check in with his one-time colleague from his first stint with the Giants, Pratik Patel, about how Wellman seeks to ensure optimal player performance and reduce injuries. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, P-Train, credentialed member of the New York Giants media. I covered the Giants, of course, for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country, the part of the Fan Nation Network over on SI.com. And I'm pleased to welcome in on this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, Pratik Patel, who is a former assistant coach for the New York Giants, worked with Aaron Wellman, who was just rehired by the New York Giants to be their executive director of performance and player performance. And Pratik, I'm absolutely excited about this hire. I think the Giants did right here.
Yeah, I think they did too. And, I'm definitely happy for both sides. Obviously, when Aaron left, it was a great opportunity for him to work in a really good position in college. And then, as you know, with sport at every level, a lot of things happen. Unfortunately, the head coach he was working closely with got let go. Indiana's going on a different direction. And the new regime decided to, make a change. And it seemed like a great and fitting opportunity for, Aaron to get back to a place where he had a lot of respect. It wasn't an easy decision when he left the Giants. He told us about the process of what happened. Obviously got a deal that he couldn't say no to, but he has a lot of respect for the organization. Obviously, Ronnie, Mr. Mara, a lot of people in the building have a ton of respect for him too. I was fortunate enough to get a chance to work with him and for him from 17, 18, 19, and, early part of 2020, and got a chance to really see how he operated, pretty much worked every single day together, developed a really good professional relationship. And I think he's a major asset, just knowing a lot about health and performance, knowing a lot about the coaches that are in the game at college and pro. What he brings to the table is very unique. He's already proved it once with the Giants, although unfortunately it was a time when the team was in a rebuilding mode. And I kind of say the team's like in year 9 of a rebuild. But you do what you can with seeing if there's areas that need to be improved upon, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially given the injury situation for this team. I mean, they have been at or near the top of injuries, games lost every year, it seems, since Aaron and yourself left. And, one of the reasons, what I do on the show, especially this is for my first timers here, is whenever the Giants have what I consider a big coaching hire, it's important to kind of reach out to people who have worked with them and find out a little bit more about how they work. And, I know people will remember Aaron Wellman, but nobody really kind of paid attention to that because everything, like I said, was kind of quiet. Pratik, what can you tell us? You mentioned that Aaron has a unique way about him, about how he approaches stuff. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, he's very detailed oriented. And as a coach, regardless of what your job is, you want to be very detailed oriented. We know the ones that are most successful, they have a plan. They know a lot about a lot. And they want to make sure that everybody understands it too, and trying to turn over every stone, understand what it is that you can do within your power, your control in the moment, get a chance to individualize these programs and recommendations for the athletes. You can't just have generic plans that you've used from other places. There are a lot of coaches that copy and paste things that may have been successful at other places and expect to see the same results, whether it works or not. More often than not, it doesn't. So he knows a lot about a lot. So he has a lot of experience as a head strength coach, decades in college and, in the NFL now heading back again. But it's not that he's married and tied to one methodology or what he used to do when he was successful in the college level and just bringing all that to the pros. It's like, no, you have to understand it is very different. Now I went from college to the pros. So, football is very similar with how it just operates on a day-to-day level, what players go through, what coaches go through. But when you go from college to the NFL, it's a very unique transition, and you don't necessarily know what it's like and how to be successful until you actually get thrown into the mix and get through a first year. So my first year at 17 was that was nuts. That was crazy. But you couldn't implement any and everything that you want to because you got a head coach that gets fired, you got a GM that gets fired, and you're on the chopping block. You think you're gonna get let go, but getting a chance to work with a guy like Aaron, it forces you to bring your game and your knowledge and your work ethic up to his level because that's what he brings every single day. And he's no nonsense. He knows exactly what he wants and he communicates that in a very effective way. That's his personality. That's who he is. He doesn't try to fake the funk. He doesn't try to be somebody else. And the players respect that. He developed a lot of really good relationships with a lot of players to the tune when they left, they were always seeking information back from him, back from me. I've had, a few that reached out to say hey, I'm still working with Wellman, I'm still doing this, still doing that, when he had ended up leaving and going back to the college sector. So that's a huge deal when you have somebody who knows exactly what to do, has a process, isn't afraid to evaluate the process, do what it takes to continually get better, to push the organization in the right direction.
Can you give us a peek behind the curtain, so to speak? Does Aaron prescribe to free weights versus machines? Does he prescribe to flexibility, yoga? What exactly, I know every player is different. Every player is going to get a different routine, but what are some of the staples of what Aaron incorporates in training athletes?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, at first, it just has it comes down to doing a proper assessment on the players, working really collaboratively with the medical staff, which we ended up doing. Like, we were talking with Ronnie and his staff every single day, meeting with them every single day, talking about what is going on with the players, things that we knew about, things that we didn't know about, because a lot of it, again, there's an onus on the players. And so from that, you understand that each position has specific demands, whether he's talking to the position coaches, the coordinators, about what it is that they want to see from them, or from the higher ups, the admins, the GMs, about, okay, this is what this player is, this is what he needs to improve upon, this is what we can do in the moment to help train them and get them better, to be able to handle those demands of practice, to be ready to handle these workloads on game day. And so you kind of deconstruct that and you work backwards, and then you start programming and planning. So, ultimately there's no one, hey, it's all dumbbell stuff, it's all barbell stuff. Like, everything's in the mix. And you've probably seen the Giants weight room. I know it's gone through a transformation and a renovation since he came in, he transformed it, he left, they brought in a new staff, they transformed it again. So I assume that there's going to be a shift there too, with the potential to continue to bring on improvements and do what's necessary to have the right resources to be able to train the players the way that they need to be trained to get ready for practice and get ready for games. So again, it's just programming specifically for each individual position group, for each individual player, because they all have different backgrounds. Some have a lot of wear and tear. Some have been vets for, 8, 9, 10 years. Some are rookies that don't have anything limiting them or holding them back. So that's the kind of thought process he puts together in place. And again, very collaboratively with everybody else in the building that's involved with player health and performance.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. And it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased about your life. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge if you find that the one that you were assigned to isn't a match. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Now, I had you on the show a few weeks ago. We were talking about injuries. That was a 2-part interview, by the way. For those of you who might have missed it, I'm going to link it in the show notes. But, one of the questions that we in the media kept asking Joe Shane, the general manager, is what's with the injuries? What are you guys doing? You have, these sports scientists, whoever they might be, why are these injuries happening? And Joe Shane was pretty much like, well, if it was one consistent injury, we could look into it and kind of see what's going on. But I look at it as they had a lot of soft tissue injuries, hamstrings, calves, groins, etc. So that being said, I mean, how does Aaron's input kind of factor into this work with the faceless sports scientists that they have? And, what can he do you think, to maybe cut down on some of these? Because they're happening on grass, they're happening on turf. It doesn't seem to discriminate. So what can Aaron bring to that process, do you think, to maybe cut down on some of these injuries?
Yeah. And again, I don't want to speak directly for him. I could give you some insight on what I think would be the best thing, or what I've seen in the past, is just obviously having a great relationship with the head coach, because the head coach is going to dictate what the intensity, the duration of practices are going to look like, but also making sure that his input is valid, to where if what's being laid out in terms of, Monday to Sunday for the entire team, is the volume too high? Is the volume too low? Are we giving them adequate rest appropriately? Is it specifically hitting one position group too hard versus another? Like, these are a lot of the things that he was working really closely, especially with Coach Mack, because Coach Mack and Aaron worked really closely together. Coach Mack was the one who brought Aaron in, and then had to have that brand new relationship with the new head coach, have a brand new relationship with the new head coach. So I think first and foremost, that's really, really important to understand, like, what is the thought process coming from this coach who, had a lot of success last year. Obviously the NFL is very difficult. It's hard to sustain success every single year and make sure, you're getting awards and accolades like that. And then the next is, once you understand what the expectation is from, the owner, the president, CEO, all that, coming down to the GM, coming down to the head coach, and what the players are going to be experiencing, then it's like, okay, now we have a better idea of exactly what it is that we need to do to make sure that when we test the players, we assess them to gauge where their health status is, and then put in those recommendations for, okay, this is the threshold or level that, we want to make sure that the players are starting at, and this is where we need to continually do to build them up, whether it's movements in the weight room, whether it's strategically conditioning them appropriately, doing it by position group, and then making sure that everything else around them is supporting what it is that the team needs as a whole, and then individually, position group and individual players, to help them recover. Whether it's, the things that we were doing was strategic recovery days in season, working with massage therapists, the Normatex, the red light beds, the yoga, the breath work, everything that we know provides a performance and health benefit, but isn't necessarily going to speak to everybody, because every player has specific preferences of what it is that they would like to do. In the same token, using the data, whatever assessments are getting done, to recognize, like, hey, I have a more individualized recommendation for you to do this. Like, this is what you normally do for your recovery. This is how you eat. This is how you supplement. I think this is even better based on what we know about you, what you're going to be doing out on the field, and what the expectation is. That way, it's a nice synergy between both sides, instead of letting the player fend for themselves and or not doing enough on the front end, if you do have the resources and access to be able to provide those recommendations for them.
Players, especially the high profile players who can afford it, also hire an army of trainers and masseuses and stretch therapists and you name it, nutritionists and whatnot. How does Aaron, can you give us some insight as to how Aaron works with those people? Or does, especially if there's a conflict of interest, if the trainer, if he's telling them to do one thing and they're high priced, consultants are telling them to do another, how do they kind of bridge the gap there? And is that a problem, do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is always just being very transparent with the players. He's always had a great relationship with the players, and knowing that, look, reality is the guys are going to have people in their corner, whether we deem them as supportive and or assets, or, is this just a person, a part of their group, who's been along for the ride, who's just, trying to tell them X, Y, and Z that might not be in their best interest. So I think, again, developing that relationship and having that full transparency, at least learning what it is that they want to divulge. Because honestly, the truth is there's a lot of things that players end up doing that, and this is pretty much any professional athlete or any high level athlete, they'll seek out things that whether the organization can provide or whether the NFL deems, as good or as bad or as acceptable or not, that do provide a benefit. And ultimately there's a lot of things that you can't recommend to them. And sometimes you just don't want to know about that because you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. But at the same time, if there is something like, like a chiropractor, a massage person, acupuncturist, dry needling person, somebody else that's providing, training and strength and conditioning information, hopefully there's at least a collaborative effect and not, doing too much in one area and not enough in another area. Sometimes I think players think they just have to constantly do more and more and more. And then they neglect the fact that, you can't hard charge and put your foot on the pedal all the time and expect to operate the way that you need to without any rest or recovery.
Pratik, one of the things that kind of alarms me, for lack of a better term, is when I hear players say to, oh, my off-season goal is I want to add 10 pounds or 15 pounds, or, oh, I want to lose, however many pounds. How much of that, do you think factors into some of the problems these players have? And how does Aaron, how would Aaron get involved in helping to determine whether a guy should gain or lose?
Yeah. And, that's a song and dance that happens every year. You have players that, they have certain habits and they kind of skirt by and they get through the season. They can still perform at a high level, independent of, is their body exactly where it could potentially be to be even better? That's just what they are. That's how they get to this level. Doing as many assessments as you can to really learn about the individual, I guess, physiology and size of a player and genetic makeup kind of gives more guideline of that individual person's ability to, like, hey, you probably can and should put on X amount of weight, or, hey, I think you would probably operate and play better if you were able to lean out a little bit, based on how a player subjectively feels, what they tell you, what their coach or position coach tells you about them. And a lot of players do sometimes want that information, having a lot of conversations with a lot of players after leaving. A lot of them just said, like, hey, I never really knew where I should be at, weight wise, or, should I gain, should I lose? Coaches have always told me to be X, Y, and Z because the comparative eye is something that a lot of people just fall in love with. Hey, this player is an all pro and this is what their stature is. Everybody else should be like that. It's like, in a perfect world, that would be great, but they're not accounting for a lot of the individual variances and differences. So, in 2018, we sought out the help of, one of the world's foremost anthropometrists in Francis Holloway. So Aaron tracked him down, he brought him in. We learned from him. We learned about frame size profiling, a lot of this stuff, the muscle to bone ratio, learning about the individual genetics of a player, what their potential is to, put on muscle mass based on how big their skeleton was. And it started with just observations and research questions, and it snowballed to, being able to test some of these theories out and learn more about those players. So using something like that, as opposed to just throwing guys in a bod pod and getting generic body composition on them and saying, like, well, this is what the number is. I'm going to compare you to these standards of what we think the best players should be at, and then giving them a recommendation when it might not speak to exactly what it is that they need. So that's one of the ways, using some of these more advanced, metrics to be able to give some insight to the players on, like, hey, I'm not going to compare you to other players. I want to compare you to yourself and at least give you that opportunity to be a better version of yourself. Now, do they follow through? That's the difficult part. The second they leave, the facility, when the season's over, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, where you can be a resource for them if they have questions. But if you don't get to see them until April again, you might not know what kind of shape or condition they come back in. It could be, hey, I'm 20 pounds overweight and I need you to help me lose weight over the course of off-season training. Or, hey, I'm, 5-10 pounds underweight. I need to start putting muscle mass back on because, maybe I didn't do what I should have done in the off-season.
From the last time, Aaron was here, which I believe was 2018, I think was or 2019. It was one of those years. How has the sports science evolved? I'm sure there's been, there's new discoveries being made every day. What are some of the things that you think might find their way into the program? I know you don't want to speak for him, but, I also know you keep up with all this stuff.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is there hasn't been like significant groundbreaking discoveries with, hey, we're doing additional data monitoring, we're doing additional like testing and assessments. There are some teams that they do a ton of things. There's some teams that don't do a lot of things. I think more often than not, it's what are you actually doing with what you're asking the players to participate in, and do they understand and buy in? So, when we were there, we weren't trying to, make it like a lab type situation where we're doing all these assessments every single day, testing everything left, right, front, and center, because ultimately you have a population that is a little bit apprehensive of being asked to do these things day after day after day. It's a little bit easier to do that in college when you have a lot more time and you can actually force them. There's no CBA in college. If you ask a player to do this, like generally they're going to end up having to do it. They don't have a choice, but it's a players league now. And the truth of the matter, everything that I've kept up with, everything that I've seen, it still goes back to a lot of the things that we're doing. Just try to individualize those recommendations for the players, learn about their health status, the unknown things, the internal status of it. So you can actually create better recommendations for them, because a lot of players are walking around thinking they're healthy, and when ultimately they really aren't, because these bad habits start from before they even get to high school or college, and nobody even gets a chance to test and educate them on them. So it's one of those if not, but when something's going to happen, a soft tissue injury, an ACL, an Achilles. I think those are more of the things that are becoming more prevalent with the individual tests, the blood work, the stool, the genetic stuff, things that you can do within the confines of the rules within teams. That's becoming more popular and prevalent, which is, again, ultimately giving you more insight on their health status. Because these players are strong enough, they're fit enough. They always have been. And it doesn't matter what, if it's on grass, turf, whatever. Like you've seen this year, quarterbacks, players are getting injured on both surfaces. So you can't really point the finger and blame one versus the other.
Hey, Giant fans, LinkedIn Jobs knows that your small business's success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of the small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors through a process that's intuitive, quick, and easy. So don't spend time sorting through endless resumes and dead-end leads in your search for the right candidates. Put LinkedIn Jobs to work to you today for free by visiting linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. Hey, Giant fans, if you want to secure tickets to your favorite concert shows and sporting events without the stress, you need to check out GameTime, the fast and easy way to buy tickets right up until the day of the event. With amazing deals on last minute tickets and their best prices guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. With GameTime, you not only get the lowest prices guaranteed, you also get clear images of seat views and event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So go ahead and snag the tickets without the stress with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. Again, that promo code is LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first order at GameTime. Now, Pratik, a question I've gotten a lot from fans is, why is it that the Giants always have these injuries, and yet you get teams like the Eagles and the Jets, who, of course, play on the same stadium as the Giants? They seem to escape that. Is it a matter of luck? Is it a matter of procedures? What are some of the biggest differences, in the work that you've done, and I'm not asking you to criticize what the Giants have done in the past, but there's got to be some kind of difference, because or is there just not one size fits all in keeping, reducing these injuries?
Yeah, I think what it just comes down to is just making sure that everybody is doing what they can to learn about what it is the players are doing and going through, what their health status is, crafting the plan to support them, to help them get ready for practices, to get ready for game days, regardless if it's home and away, and being as diligent and detailed with any and everything that could impact a player's ability to perform, whether it's travel, whether it's weather, whether it's understanding the current health status of a player you're bringing in, whether it's a rookie, whether it's a free agent, regardless of if you're using that criteria to either sign them or not. Sometimes players are going to be signed because they're good, even though they have a history of injuries, and then using whatever it is that you want to test and learn about them and conveying it to them, because ultimately the player is going to have to buy in and do something about it. It's not that we have this perfect plan put in place. We have the smartest and brightest and best people in the world that you've hired and you've brought them in the building. Ultimately, if you can't get the players to buy in and do what it is that you feel is right for them or in their best interest, then all of that stuff doesn't mean anything. And I think, again, that's one of the things that we were very fortunate to be able to do in a very short amount of time is, with changing roster and, revolving coaching door, is, again, just set the stage, be on top of our stuff, do whatever we could in the moment, from a performance and health perspective, in the weight room, with nutrition, with the testing, and be very adaptable, because, working in team sport is very chaotic, especially in the NFL, and there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot going on, and you have a short amount of time with the players to be able to implement these strategies and get it across to them. So it's tough. The funny thing is, some of these teams that had done really well for a long time are now seeing some of the regression too, with, they had been very healthy, but now they're not. So I think a lot of it definitely does ebb and flow. It just seems, unfortunately, the Giants have not had as much success in that area as that they really want to. All
right. Now, final question for you, because I think this is one on a lot of people's minds. It's been believed by a lot of people, myself included, that the constant turnover in coaches at the strength, on the strength and conditioning level has been a detriment, because you got different people coming in with different ideas. And now, you have this player on this diet. Now, all of a sudden you're changing it up, or this player's on this type of workout and you're changing it up. So my question to you is, realistically speaking, what kind of impact do you think Aaron can make in this first year coming up? I know it's going to take some time for his program to really take root within the organization, within the players, but what kind of impact, based on what you know about him and how he works and how he thinks, do you think he can make in this first year?
I think it can have a really positive impact, especially if everybody's on board and, recognizing that ultimately player availability is the most important key metric in terms of, yes, it does have a positive correlation with wins and losses, but ultimately having your best players out there as often as you can is going to give you the best chance to win if you have the right system in place, if you have a really good roster and a belief within the team. Again, I don't know what the future holds. I know he's going to work as hard as possible to do what's right for the players, for the organization. I think, if things go the way that they should, it's going to definitely have an immediate positive effect, because things are going to start changing the second he gets in the door with how are we operating? What is it that we're doing? Like being as proactive as possible, not as reactive, but understanding you have to be very adjustable and adaptable when things do go wrong. Getting a chance to develop relationships with new people in the building that, hadn't been there back in 16, 17, 18, 19. I'm optimistic for them. I'm hoping it definitely goes in the right direction. But again, there's a lot of moving pieces still involved in.
Nowhere to go but up for the Giants, who have been one of the most injured teams over the last several years. And it doesn't matter. Grass, turf, game scenario, practice, it just doesn't seem to matter. They have yet to find an answer, despite, like I said, having this group of faceless and nameless sports scientists that, Coach Dable always talks about. All right, everybody, that is Pratik Patel. He used to be on the Giants coaching staff with Aaron Wellman, so he knows him really, really well. They were the dynamic duo not too long ago, kept the team relatively healthy. So that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. I want to thank Pratik for the time and the expertise as always. You can also follow him on Twitter. He also has his own private practice. If you're looking to get in shape, have health questions, have nutrition questions, he's the guy you want to contact. He's really good at what he does. So that'll do it for us today. We will see you tomorrow on the Locked On Giants podcast.